Forget your typical happy hour. At my bar, the last call might just be for the other side. I work the night shift at a genuinely haunted hotel. And let me tell you, the guests aren't the only ones checking in. From bizarre guest requests to rules that defy logic, you won't believe what goes down when the sun sets here. I start every shift the same way, buttoning up my black dress shirt, tightening my name tagged to my chest, and watching the sun disappear behind the jagged line of West Texas desert. The Grand Elysian Hotel, as it's been called since 1901, sits on the edge of forgotten rail town just outside Amarillo. It used to cater to rich cattlemen, drifters, and socialites. These days, it mostly attracts two kinds of people: curious tourists chasing ghost stories, and the occasional desperate traveler too tired to keep driving through the night. I can't blame them. From the outside, the place still has charm. Ornate iron balconies, red brick facade, a grand staircase that curls upward like the tail of a serpent. But past twilight, the hotel changes. By the time I step behind the mahogany bar in the Grand Lounge, the light has a sickly tint to it, like the bulbs are filtering through bone. The wallpaper peels in certain corners like it's trying to escape, and the antique mirrors along the walls always seem to reflect just a half second too slow. You might think I'm exaggerating, but that's only because you haven't worked here. My first night, 2 years ago, I thought the ghost stories were just for show. The management gave me a binder, a literal red leather binder with silver corners, filled with job expectations. Inside, tucked between time card instructions and the liquor restock form, was a typed sheet titled, "Rules for the Night Shift Bartender, Do Not Ignore." It was taped in with brittle yellowing scotch tape, and every one of the 6 rules was typed in bold. At first, I thought it was some weird hotel tradition, a way to mess with new hires. But the manager who trained me didn't laugh when I asked. He just tapped his fingers nervously on the bar and said, "Follow them, no matter what. Some things in this place don't appreciate being forgotten." That brings us to rule number 1. At exactly 2 a.m., place a glass of bourbon, no ice, at the far left stool of the bar. It must be Old Forester. Never look directly at who drinks it. The first few nights, I didn't even get at 2 a.m. There were enough rowdy guests in town that I kept busy making drinks until near dawn. But about a week in, the hotel hit a slow period. I remember clearly. Only 2 guests checked in, both asleep before midnight. I cleaned every glass, wiped down the bar, and leaned against the counter, scrolling through my phone as the clock crept toward 2. The second hand clicked. 2 a.m. I remembered the rule and hesitated. It was ridiculous, I thought. Theater. But part of me, a part one wasn't ready to admit existed, wanted to see what would happen if I followed through. I reached under the bar, pulled out the dusty bottle of Old Forester, and poured a finger of bourbon into a crystal glass. The far left stool sat under a flickering bulb. No one ever chose that one. I placed the drink carefully on a coaster. Then I turned my back and walked away. 30 seconds later, I heard the soft scrape of wood on wood, a stool shifting. My blood turned to ice. There was no one in the bar. I hadn't heard the elevator ding or the hallway doors creak, but something had taken a seat. I stayed facing the mirrored liquor shelf, pretending to rearrange bottles, heart pounding so hard I thought it might shatter the glass in front of me. Then came a sound so subtle it chilled me to the marrow. The faintest clink, like a glass being lifted. A sip, a swallow, then nothing. I waited 2 full minutes before turning back around, forcing myself to walk calmly toward the stool. The glass was empty and warm. I swear to God, it was warm to the touch. I didn't tell anyone, not the day's staff, not my manager, not even my friends. I couldn't explain it. I didn't want to sound like I was going insane. But from that night forward, I followed the first rule without question. They say the stool belongs to Mr. Thomas, though no one knows if that was ever his real name. Some of the cleaning crew say he was a railroad baron who died in his sleep in room 613 back in 1912. Others whisper He was poisoned at the bar by a jealous lover. Whatever the truth is, his presence is real. Sometimes I see his glass slide across the bar a few inches if I'm not looking directly, just enough to let me know he's there. Beyond Mr. Thomas, the entire hotel carries a presence. The kind you can't put your finger on, but you feel watching you, waiting. The chandelier above the bar sometimes sways gently, even when there's no breeze. Cold drafts snake through the carpeted lounge like someone brushing past your legs. Every floorboard creak in the lobby echoes like footsteps. Once, I caught a reflection in the bar mirror. Someone tall, wearing a brimmed hat, standing just behind me. I spun around. No one, but the air where he had stood was freezing. I breathed out fog. Another night, around 3 a.m., a woman in a tattered wedding dress wandered into the lounge from the main staircase. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. Just walked slowly across the room, trailing invisible footsteps behind her. I tried to call out to stop her, thinking she was a lost guest. But the moment I stepped from behind the bar, she vanished through the double doors into the ballroom. The ballroom hasn't been used since the fire of '76. There's ash still baked into the cracks of the parquet floor. They come and go, these guests. Some are harmless. Some are sad. But a few make you wish the sun would rise faster. I learned early to avoid room 409. I never touch its door. Never knock. Never clean the glasses guests leave outside it. And the elevator? It never lets me stop there anyway. A week ago, something new happened. I just placed Mr. Thomas's bourbon out at 2 a.m. when a voice came from the darkness near the lounge entrance. Do you ever wonder why the rules exist? I nearly dropped the bottle. There was a man standing just inside the shadows, tall and pale with sunken eyes. I didn't hear him approach, didn't see him come in. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. He stepped forward and smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips. 6 rules. 6 safeguards, he whispered. But rules are meant to be tested, aren't they? Then he turned and walked away, straight into the closed elevator. The doors slid open without a sound and swallowed him whole. I checked the security footage later. He wasn't there. That's when I started to worry. Not about ghosts. About who made the rules and why only 6. What happens if I break one? Or worse, what happens if I follow them all? The night I heard the piano play for the first time, I thought maybe, just maybe, I was ready to quit. The music drifted in from the ballroom, soft, elegant, the kind of waltz you'd hear at a masquerade. But it was slow, too slow, like the notes were being pulled from the keys by reluctant fingers. That's when I remembered rule number 3. If the piano plays by itself, you must play the same melody back, note for note. Do not improvise. But I hadn't even gotten to rule number 2 yet, which terrified me even more. Some rules don't make sense until you see what happens when they're ignored. Others make too much sense once they've already ruined something. I hadn't broken rule number 1, and I sure as hell wasn't ready to face rule number 3. But rule number 2 crept up on me before I could even prepare for it. The next night felt different from the start. The evening crowd trickled in around 8. 2 traveling salesmen, a trio of middle-aged women on a ghost tour, and a younger couple with heavy bags under their eyes and no patience for small talk. I served drinks, listened to stories I'd heard 100 times, and watched the antique clock over the bar crawl toward midnight like it was dragging its feet through quicksand. The lounge quieted. The guests went to bed, and the air thickened. A damp, heavy kind of silence settled over everything, as if the building itself were holding its breath. That's when the lights dimmed on their own, just a flicker, and I knew the hotel was shifting. Then came the sound, distant, muffled, faint, laughter, children's laughter. It echoed from deep within the building, somewhere above, or maybe below, but it carried with it something that didn't belong, wrongness. There was no joy in it, just repetition, too rhythmic, like a recording played over and over, slightly warped. My blood ran cold, because I knew exactly what I'd just heard. Rule number 2, If you hear laughter from the ballroom after midnight, do not acknowledge it. Do not investigate. Do not even react. I froze behind the bar. The laughter rose and fell, sharp and tinny, then cut off mid-giggle as if someone had slammed the lid on it. My instinct was to turn toward the sound, to find the source, to do something. But the words of the rule thundered in my head like a warning siren. Don't react. Don't react. So I didn't. I stayed still, eyes forward, breathing slow and shallow. My heart pounded, but I forced my face into a mask of indifference. That's when something brushed the back of my neck. Not the air, not a breeze. Fingers. Cold, impossibly cold, and lingering. I clenched my jaw so tightly I felt a pop in my ear. A soft breath passed near my ear, and a child's voice whispered, "I see you." I bit my tongue until it bled, and the presence was gone. I stood frozen for a full 5 minutes before daring to move. The bar was empty, every stool still, every glass untouched, but the warmth of my skin was gone, and my hands trembled uncontrollably. I called in sick the next night. I told myself it was stress, that I needed a break, that the hotel could survive without me for one shift. But the moment I stepped away from the building, a part of me felt exposed, like I'd made some kind of cosmic mistake, like I'd left something open. That night, I stayed awake in my apartment, half expecting Mr. Thomas's glass to appear on my coffee table. It didn't, but my apartment phone rang at 2:01 a.m. When I picked it up, the line was dead, but someone or something exhaled on the other end. I returned to work the next day. It was better inside the storm than outside it. Somehow, at least within the hotel's walls, the horror had rules. There was structure, and I wasn't ready to test what happened when you ignored it altogether. That night, the ballroom doors were propped open. They were never open. A crimson carpet stretched from the lounge to the ballroom threshold, like a tongue licking out from a mouth. Inside, chandeliers twinkled with a faint, bluish glow. Dust floated in shafts of cold light. The grand piano in the center gleamed like polished obsidian. I didn't step inside, but I knew that at some point soon I'd be forced to. The rules continued to taunt me. Mr. Thomas's bourbon glass cracked clean down the middle as I poured it. The ice machine spat out red slush instead of cubes. The elevator refused to stop at the 5th floor, then only stopped there every time I pressed the lobby button. And then came the guest in room 502. She checked in just after midnight. No luggage, no car, no ID, just a reservation scribbled in red ink across a crumpled napkin. The concierge on duty looked pale and distant when he handed me her drink order. Just one word. Mill. I've worked at this hotel long enough to know the difference between unusual and wrong. Something about her didn't sit right. Her dress was old-fashioned, but not in a vintage way, like it had actually been sewn 80 years ago. The pearls around her neck looked too tight, and her smile didn't touch her eyes. She sat in the lounge for 30 minutes and never blinked once. When she left, the barstool cushion was soaked through, as if she'd been bleeding onto it, but there wasn't a single stain on her dress. Later that night, the piano began to play. Soft. Hesitant. The same waltz I'd heard days before, but this time it wasn't slow. It was perfectly paced, graceful even. Notes hung in the air like perfume. They called to me, every chord a beckoning hand. I approached the ballroom doors like a man in a dream. Rule number 3 echoed in my mind. If the piano plays by itself, you must play the same melody back. Note for note. Do not improvise. I never played piano in my life, but something else had taken over. My hands itched. My muscles moved without permission. I stepped into the ballroom. The chandelier dimmed. The moment my foot touched the tile floor, the music stopped. The piano bench was empty, but the keys were still moving. I sat down, and I played. My fingers moved like puppets, replaying the melody exactly. Every note was familiar, like I'd known it in another life. The air in the ballroom grew colder with each chord. the temperature dropping like a stone in a well. I could see my breath. The mirrors lining the ballroom fogged over. Then they began to clear. Faces stare back. Not mine. Not guests. Dozens. Maybe hundreds of pale, sunken, expressionless faces pressed against a glass from the other side. Watching. Waiting. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering words I couldn't hear. The chandelier flickered. One of the faces smiled. And then the music ended. I sprinted back to the bar. My hands were shaking. My legs barely worked. But I knew I had followed the rule. Whatever wanted me to play had been satisfied. But that night left a scar. Since then, my reflection hasn't looked right. It's me, but not quite. The timing's off. Sometimes my reflection smiles before I do. Sometimes it lingers when I turn away. Sometimes it blinks when I don't. The hotel continues to test me. Every shift, a new whisper, a new chill, a new anomaly that defies logic. But I follow the rules, because I've seen what happens when you don't. I once asked the concierge, an older man named Ellis who's been working here for 34 years, where the rules came from. He lit a cigarette with trembling fingers and said, "They weren't made to keep you in line, kid. They were made to keep them from noticing you too much." Then he looked toward the ballroom and added, "And 6 is just the beginning." Now I can't stop wondering, what happens when you reach rule number 6? What happens if someone breaks all 6? Or worse, what happens if they're rewritten? There's a moment during every night shift when the silence isn't just empty, it's expectant. The hotel doesn't creak. The lights don't flicker. The air becomes so still hums. That moment came around 3:06 a.m. the following night. I had just wiped down the last glass, set Mr. Thomas's empty bourbon glass on the shelf, and sat with my elbows on the bar, trying not to stare into the mirror. I'd started covering it with a dish towel lately. Not because I was afraid of what I'd see, no. I was afraid of what might blink when I didn't. Earlier in the shift, the concierge, Ellis, handed me a note folded 3 times with shaking hands. No words, just a hand-drawn sketch of a piano key circled in red ink. Underneath was a number, 4. When I asked him about it, he wouldn't meet my eyes. "I didn't write it," he muttered. "It was in the drawer under the ledger. Addressed to you. There was no name on it. Just a sketch." That's when I knew I had reached rule number 4, though I hadn't been told what it was. Not directly. The rules never arrived that way after the first night. They found you. They slipped into your coat pocket, whispered from behind a vent, or etched themselves into the condensation on the bar mirror. I didn't know what key number 4 meant. Not yet. But I would soon. Just before 3:30 a.m., the elevator dinged. That sound never meant anything good. There were no guest check-ins at that hour. The elevator had no reason to be in motion. And worse, it came down from the 6th floor. That floor wasn't in use. It had been closed off after some kind of structural fire decades ago. No working lights. No ventilation. No room keys issued. But the elevator doors slid open, and a man stepped out. Tall, thin, pale skin like paper. He wore a black 3-piece suit with lapels so sharp they looked like blades. His hair was combed back tightly, and his eyes, God, those eyes, they looked like glass marbles soaked in ink. He moved silently toward the bar and took the 4th stool from the left. He sat without blinking, without speaking, and tapped one long, gloved finger against the bar 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. I felt frozen behind the counter. Not afraid in the way you'd be scared of a snake or a scream, but in the way you'd feel when a part of you knows this is something old, something that had been here long before I arrived, maybe before the hotel itself. He gestured toward the mirror. I didn't want to look, but I did. The mirror had changed. Where my towel had been, now the entire glass was clear and covered in handprints. Smudged, long, thin hands that looked like they belonged to children or something not quite human. And in the center of it all, scrawled in reverse in something black and oily, were the words, "Play key 4." The man tilted his head. Then, without speaking, he reached into his coat and play something on the bar. A piano key. Not a whole piano. Just a single, detached ivory key, yellowed with age and carved with a Roman numeral. 4. That's when the chandelier above us flickered once. Then all the lights in the bar went out. Pitch black. Total silence. And then the piano started to play. I don't know how I reached the ballroom. I don't remember walking. I just remember being there, hands trembling, throat dry, key clenched so tightly in my fist it left grooves in my palm. The music was louder this time, the same waltz but now distorted, dragging itself forward like it didn't want to finish. The piano bench was empty, but the keys were moving again. I stepped forward, and the moment my foot touched the ballroom floor, the music stopped, same as last time. Rule number 3 had told me to mimic the melody, but rule number 4 wasn't so clear. I looked down at the single key in my hand. There was a faint slot carved into the piano's fallboard, just above middle C, like something had been removed or meant to be replaced. I inserted the key. It clicked into place, and then the piano played me. My hands moved on their own, pressing keys in a rhythm I didn't know, chords that sent vibrations through my chest like thunder. But it wasn't a waltz this time. It was something darker, sharper. The song climbed higher and higher, faster and faster, until the notes became too complex for human fingers. My vision blurred. The mirrors lining the ballroom trembled. And then I heard it, the voices. They weren't coming from the piano. They were behind me, all around, breathing, muttering, speaking in broken English and something ancient. I turned just slightly and caught a glimpse. There were people in the ballroom now, but they weren't alive. Figures in old clothes, guests from long ago, stood shoulder to shoulder, watching. Some with missing faces, others with eyes sewn shut. A woman in a velvet dress with no mouth. A man in a bellhop uniform whose head hung at the wrong angle. They watched the performance, and they were smiling. The final chord hit like a gunshot. I gasped and staggered away from the piano. The ghosts vanished. The room emptied, and the ivory key ejected itself, clattering to the ground. When I bent to pick it up, it had cracked in two, and the Roman numeral 4 was gone. I returned to the bar in a daze. The pale man was gone. So was the mirror message. But in his place sat an envelope. Inside was a list, typed, crisp white paper, no markings. It read, 1. Mr. Thomas's drink, bourbon, 2 a.m. sharp. 2. Ignore the ballroom laughter. 3. Match the melody. 4. Insert the 4th key when summoned. 5. TBD. 6. TBD. That's when it hit me. These rules weren't for protection. They were tasks, each one an offering, a ritual, a summoning. But for what? Later that night, Ellis found me staring at the broken key in the staff kitchen. You reached the 4th, he whispered, closing the door behind him. You're further than most. Do you remember Michael? I didn't. The name rang a bell, but nothing specific. He was the bartender before you. Made it to rule number 5. What happened to him? Ellis didn't answer right away. He simply rolled up his left pant leg. Where his calf should have been was a mass of scar tissue, burned, melted, fused into a twisted knot. He heard the 5th rule, but didn't follow it. I couldn't breathe. You're being prepared, Ellis said. The hotel, it chooses someone every few years. Someone it likes. Someone it needs. Needs for what? He didn't answer. At dawn, I finally looked in the mirror. Not the one behind the bar. The one in the guest bathroom on the 1st floor. And I swear to you, my reflection didn't blink at all. Not once. It just smiled. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that settles in when you stop fighting the unnatural, when fear becomes routine and survival hinges on simply following the script. After the 4th rule, I began to dream of pianos, of cracking ivory and faceless figures dancing in slow circles. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that melody, the one I played without knowing the notes, echoing from deep within the hotel's bones. On the 3rd night after the key incident, I arrived early. Too early. The sky was still tinged with violet, the sun not fully gone, and the hotel looked almost normal in the fading light. Almost. But as I stepped inside, I knew the building had already changed. The air was thicker, still, like it was waiting. Ellis wasn't at the front desk. The ledger was closed. The bell above the door hadn't rung when I entered, and someone had left a drink waiting at the bar. Not Mr. Thomas's bourbon. Something else. A tall, narrow crystal glass filled with black liquid, viscous and opaque, with a faint crimson glow at the bottom. No coaster, no condensation, just sitting there like it had always been. Next to it was a folded piece of paper. 3 words. It's Rule 5. I didn't touch the drink. I didn't even sit behind the bar. I backed away slowly, heart racing, until I reached the guest elevator. I slammed the lobby button, but the panel didn't light up. Instead, the elevator doors opened on their own, and inside, taped to the mirror, was a new set of instructions. Typed. Fresh. Rule number 5. If you are summoned to room 717, you must go. Not 3 times. Do not enter unless invited. If the voice sounds like yours, leave immediately and do not return until morning. My stomach turned. Room 717 didn't exist. Or at least, it shouldn't. The hotel only had 6 floors. And yet, the elevator now displayed a new button. 7. I stood frozen, staring at the impossible number, feeling sweat trickle down my neck. The hotel was changing its shape, morphing to fit its needs. My needs. Or maybe its ritual. The elevator doors remained open, expectant. Eventually, I stepped inside and pressed 7. The elevator rose slower than usual, humming like it was under strain. The walls around me groaned. For a moment, I swore I saw the reflection in the mirror behind me lag, like a video buffering out of sync. When the doors opened, the hallway beyond was impossibly long, narrow, carpeted in black and gold, lined with dusty lampshades that flickered like dying stars. No windows, no exit signs, just a single door at the end. Room 717. I walked, each step echoing unnaturally behind me. As I approached, I noticed the door was unlike any other in the hotel. It wasn't wood, it was iron, rusted, sealed with 7 vertical bolts and a brass knocker in the shape of a skull. I hesitated. Then I knocked. 3 times. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was listening. Then came a voice. Come in. But it wasn't a stranger's voice. It was mine. My exact tone. My inflection. My tired cadence. I stepped back. Another voice came. This one softer. Male. Familiar. It's waiting. I ran. Back down the hall. Back into the elevator, punching the lobby button over and over until the doors finally shut. The elevator didn't drop. It plummeted, faster than I'd ever felt it move. I collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. When I returned to the bar, the black drink was gone. So was the paper. But the mirror now had a crack, straight down the middle. Thin at the top, jagged at the bottom, as if it had split in 2. Like something inside was trying to break free. Later, during the dead hour, around 3:45 a.m., I heard Ellis finally return. He didn't speak, just walked behind the desk, looked at me, and sighed. You made it back, he said. That's better than most. I asked him why the hotel had a 7th floor. He didn't answer. Instead, he lit a cigarette with a shaking hand and muttered, The 7th floor is where it watches. The floor that doesn't exist until it needs to, where the guests don't leave because they were never really guests. I asked what was behind the door in room 717. He looked at me with hollow eyes. I didn't sleep that day. The hotel followed me home. Not physically, but in feeling. My lights flickered. My apartment thermostat dropped to freezing, even in the August heat. My reflection in the bathroom shifted slightly when I turned my back. Not wrong, just off, like it was considering its next move. I returned to the bar that night, prepared to quit. I had my keys in my pocket, my resignation written. But when I stepped inside, the hotel lobby was different. Too busy. Guests bustled back and forth with foggy, undefined faces. The bellhop stand was manned by a man I'd never seen before. Music played from unseen speakers, an old record scratchy with time, looping the same bar of music over and over. Then I looked up. The hotel now had 8 floors. The elevator panel reflected it clearly. 8. Room 717 had appeared, and now something beyond it had too. There was a note waiting for me on the bar. It read, "You're almost there. Final rule tomorrow. Be ready. And remember, it can't wear you if you never open your mouth." Underneath was a single word, handwritten in red ink. Invitation. The lights above me buzzed violently. The chandelier shook. The mirror behind the bar shattered completely. But in the shards, amid my jagged reflection, one thing was clear. The version of me inside the glass was smiling. I wasn't. I once thought I was just a bartender, a guy pouring drinks and listening to ghost stories. But now I know the truth. I'm not the one working at this hotel. I'm the one being kept here. And with the final rule broken, there's no leaving. Ever. The Grand Minton was falling apart. And not just physically. The air itself had grown thick with whispers, old laughter, and the scent of scorched whiskey. The chandeliers above the bar flickered like weak candle flames, sputtering against an invisible wind. It wasn't just haunted anymore. It was awake. I sat behind the bar with a loaded revolver in front of me. Caleb had slid it across the polished wood without a word, as though it were another drink order. His sunken eyes, what remained of them, told me everything. He knew I'd reached the final step, the 6th and final rule. Rule number 6. Never, under any circumstances, drink behind the bar. It was simple. So damn simple. And yet, I knew what it meant. That rule wasn't about professionalism or ethics. It was a line in the sand. A pact. Cross it, and you give yourself to the hotel. But tonight, there was no choice. My hand shook as I grabbed a bottle of Grand Minton Reserve, the one with the red wax seal. The same bottle that only appeared when someone was close to the end. The old bartender's bottle. My thumb snapped the wax seal with a sickening pop, and I poured a measure into my glass. Amber liquid caught the flickering light and shimmered like fire. My reflection in the glass wasn't mine anymore, just a man hollowed out, stitched together by fear and alcohol. I raised the glass, and I drank. The hotel sighed. Everything changed in an instant. The lights went out, not just in the bar, but across the entire building. Total blackness. I heard footsteps overhead, dozens of them, dragging and tapping in uneven rhythms like 100 people pacing the halls at once. The walls groaned. Somewhere, a piano played itself, soft, nostalgic weeping. Then the lobby door opened, but no one entered. Only cold. Cold and something else, something that walked without feet and whispered without lips. Caleb's voice rasped behind me, almost mournful. "Now you're part of it." "I didn't want this," I muttered. "I just needed a job." He laughed, a hoarse, brittle sound. "That's how we all start." I turned to face him, but Caleb was gone. No, not gone. Changed. Where he'd stood was now a mirror, a full-length, antique thing framed in tarnished gold. In its reflection, I saw the bar, the bottles, and me. But in the mirror, I was smiling. And I wasn't alone. Behind me stood every bartender who had ever broken the 6th rule. Some wore waistcoats and bow ties from the 1800s. Some had 70s mustaches and velvet shirts. One woman in a flapper dress held a smoking cigarette. All of them had the same hollow eyes, and all of them smiled that same dead smile. The one I now wore. They reached for me, not with malice, with welcome. I ran. I tore through the lobby, past the elevators that no longer had buttons, through the dining room where the guests never aged, never blinked. A man with a missing jaw played cards with a woman whose hand were bone. They didn't notice me. Or maybe they did. Maybe they were waiting for me to join the table. I reached the service elevator, the old one, the one Caleb told me never to use, the one that skipped floors. I slammed the button. The doors creaked open, revealing darkness inside and a faint green glow. The walls were lined with portraits, all bartenders. The elevator took me down, far past the basement, past anything listed on the schematics. I counted the flickering red numbers. -1, -2, -6, -13. It stopped. I stepped into a chamber that smelled of dust, old gin, and something rotting beneath time. A bar stretched before me, elegant and untouched, with fresh glasses waiting. And standing behind it was me. But not just me. A version of me, a few years older, wearing the same clothes, same crooked name tag. He nodded. "We've been waiting for you." My knees gave out. This was where it ended, or began. Time warped in that place. I don't know how long I stood there. Hours, maybe days. At some point I spoke. "What is this place?" The other me, mirror me, wiped down the bar. "It's not hell. It's not heaven. It's duty. I didn't agree to this. You did when you took the job. You just didn't know it." I looked around. "Is there a way out?" Mirror me shrugged. "There's a door, but no one ever walks through it." I looked. At the far end of the room was a door with no handle. Carved into the wood were the rules, every one of them. At the bottom, a seventh line had appeared. Rule number 7. There are no new bartenders, only replacements. Something cracked in me. I walked behind the bar, took a towel, and wiped the glass clean. It was automatic now, natural, like muscle memory from a life I never lived. The bar above me, the real one, was still running. I could feel the glasses clinking, hear the soft laughter of people who didn't belong. And above that, I heard someone interviewing for a new job. The voice of the manager. Another hire. Another cycle. Another me. I sit behind the bar now. Not the one you've seen. The real bar. The one beneath it all. The true heartbeat of the Grand Minton. Guests come and go, but bartenders stay. You may walk into the Grand Minton one day. Maybe you'll see a nervous guy behind the bar, trying to follow the rules. If you do, tip well. He doesn't know what's coming. But we do. We always do.